And what should employees be allowed to do to prevent a theft? Joining me now, Alex Martin is a commercial lawyer and director of Taurus Legal Management. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Dee Dee.
What did you make of that particular incident with the Supercheap Auto employee?
Well, I think it was a distressing incident. I think everyone would agree about that. It's hard to put it in context because we don't know what training that employee had, what support that employee had from Supercheap. We don't know what their guidelines were about dealing with shoplifters and so on. And certainly if he is following those guidelines and doing what his employer wanted him to do, then I think he shouldn't have been stood down, and I think he's had a rough trot.
So legally, are employees allowed to stop a theft if they, what does it hinge on? Do they have to have reasonable suspicion or evidence of some sort?
Yeah, so there's really three issues or three principles that you should apply that'll look different in different contexts. And they are, number one, and this is the most important, employees in all contexts should do what's safe. So safe for themselves and safe for other people and safe even for third parties. So, if you go to grab someone and they run away and run across the road and get hit by a car, or they, pull out a knife and stab you, that's not safe, right? So the number one is safe. And then secondly, people need to look at what's lawful, so need to make sure they're not breaking the criminal law if they're pursuing someone, are they speeding in their car or otherwise breaking the law, and grabbing someone could be an assault. And then finally, they've got to do what's approved by their employer. So hopefully all employers, and this is what I do, I advise employers on these issues, that they need to have written guidelines about what employees should be doing dealing with customers generally, and in particular dealing with customers if they see that there's a potential crime.
And what about the responsibility, Alex, of the stores themselves? They often post employees, and sometimes quite junior ones, at the entrance to the store to check people's receipts as they're leaving.
Yes.
Do you think it's a good idea to have juniors in that position?
Yes, well, that's a tough one. So I think checking bags is certainly legal, and that can be a condition of entry, and you can have staff do that. But I think that's something that needs specialised training. If you're checking, then you might deal with someone who's being aggressive or someone who refuses to allow you to inspect their bag, and are you supposed to then grab the bag and force it or not? You need to employers need to be really clear with staff about what's expected. And I think if you've got a very junior person with no guidance on the door checking bags, and it's a recipe for disaster. And
this idea of citizen's arrest, and that's, I guess, what it would be if it's an employee who sees it happen, or if it's perhaps another shopper who sees it happening. How physically, what are you allowed to do to the person who you think is shoplifting?
Yes, so there is such a thing as citizen's arrest, and all citizens have this, whether you're an employee or not, you have the same rights. It's a pretty narrow thing, so I think you'd want to be very careful if you were planning on doing a citzen's arrest. It's only allowed to prevent further crime, or to keep others safe, or to stop an offender absconding. So possibly if someone was leaving, trying to run away, it might be legal to perform a citizen's arrest. And in that case, you're able to detain someone, but only to use what they call necessary and reasonable force, and not excessive force. So that's really fraught with problems. So if you're talking about grabbing someone and holding them, then you potentially it's heading towards an assault, and it'll really depend on the circumstances whether that is an assault or not. So I'd certainly counsel people to exercise caution, and counsel employers to tell their employees what's expected of them, and to tell them to exercise caution. Because, if you end up in a fight with someone over, a few $100s worth of stuff being stolen from a business, and somebody's injured, then it's really out of proportion. The damage is out of proportion to the risk. And
what about their belongings? In that particular case, there was a pram. Yes. It was conceivable that there could have been a baby in that pram. Are you allowed to look through someone's belongings, their handbag, for instance?
Yes, if it's a condition of entry on the store, that's permitted. But if somebody refuses to allow you to do that, which was the case in these circumstances, I'd be counselling employers to tell their employees to let that person go, maybe take a photo of them, maybe get the security footage, pass it on to police. I think grabbing a bag and trying to force an inspection where the person doesn't consent, even if they're obliged to consent, I think is a problem, and I'd counsel people not to do that.
Alex, I appreciate your time today. Alex Martin there, commercial lawyer and director of Taurus Legal Management. Have you ever found yourself in a position, like I said, I'm sure I saw a video at the footy from last weekend, may have been the round before, of a bloke stopping someone at the ground and holding him in a sort of bear hug, citizen's arrest, until the security people were able to come. This is in relation to people shoplifting, and we did talk about this a few weeks ago when that Supercheap Auto incident happened, and we learned at the time that the large number of, or the majority of shoplifting incidents are not reported because there's just too much goes on. And we can see that in this particular case where the guy was congratulated for the way he handled it, but ended up going to work for another employer. And as we've heard today, when he spoke for the first time, it's just been a nightmare for him and his family.